Welcome once again to the J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me on this artistic adventure. Today we'll be working with ink, pen and ink. So have your kneaded eraser, a number 2 or an HB pencil handy, and any type of ink that you would like to use. But make sure that it's archival, that it's permanent, that it's black, and a smooth ink. And let's start doing some ink drawing. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for drawing with me. Pen and ink, it's a little intimidating. And so in order to get over that intimidation part, we're going to start with our number 2 pencil, our HB pencil. Remember, everything we draw with this pencil gets erased. Now, this one is kind of square. So you can do it landscape if you'd like, or you could do it portrait. I'm going to do it portrait because it fits in my window better. So the first thing we want to do is establish where everything goes. And so we want to leave ourselves just a little bit of space on the left side. And so I don't want his nose right up to the edge. So I'm just going to make a little mark up in here and say, well, I want his horn about right in there, and his nose, somewhere down in there. I want to leave myself a little bit of space. The back side, we could have that going right up to the edge. In fact, you could even cut off a little bit if you wanted to. But I think we'll just put a little mark there and say this is where I want the back side to go. So then you say, well, okay, his whole body is kind of this peanut shape, I don't know, nut shape, kidney bean shape, something like that, from there to there. That's about the size we want it. So we've just established our size. His head, if you go from his backbone up here to his head, it is a kind of a peanut shape. Kind of want to get that peanut shape going in there. Then his legs, this one leg, if you come over to almost the center of his body, that's about where that load-bearing leg goes. So it's down in here somewhere. It's about almost right in the center. Maybe a little off to the side. And then just kind of connect that. A little curve. There's his one leg there. We can adjust this too. The other leg is just off to the side there. We can kind of add that with just this nice kind of a little oval shape. Then another oval shape. That last leg touches this front leg. And it comes in just a little bit too. So you can kind of come in and just try to establish your position, your size, whatever it is that you want to accomplish there. Your composition. Right above his leg, just the inside of his leg there, it's where that hump goes right there. So I can kind of put in a little bump right there, little mound. So now we've established our size. We can adjust it a little bit. We can say, well, I need to go up a little bit more over here. It kind of comes down right there. That's not bad. Kind of come in. I can give myself some guidelines here. Where the neck and the head go, maybe need to be a little bit bigger. These are just now guidelines, just to kind of help me to figure things out. Look at the negative space too. The space in between, like the distance between this, his ankle here and his ankle over there, the distance there, the distance between here and there. And you just kind of match them up and kind of look at them and compare them. That's called negative space. And as an artist, you have to be able to see both the positive and the negative space. So once you've got the size way you want it, you want to come close to touching 2 of the 3 sides if you can. This bottom, because he's kind of square, and if you're doing a portrait like mine, you're going to have a lot of space top and bottom. So this bottom space, we may want to add some grass
or, you know, something so that our composition kind of comes down there. But now the most important part is the head. Everybody kind of looks at the head. So I'm going to come up here. There's an ear, comes right up in here, and it's just kind of this little teardrop shape or a little oval shape. And it doesn't break the surface of where his little hump is. So it's inside that little hump. The other ear kind of comes out, kind of another teardrop shape over here, but then it's kind of connected onto the edge. And that teardrop shape kind of touches where his forehead is. This is kind of fun for me because I don't know if I've ever drawn a rhinoceros. But once you learn to draw, it's kind of all the same. It doesn't matter what you're drawing. There's one horn. That other horn is going to come out a little bit more. I've left myself enough room right there that I can do that. So it's going to come out there. Remember, if we're drawing with the side of our pencil, then all this stuff is easily erased. If you draw like this, that is not going to get easily erased. So I know it's kind of strange, kind of weird, but it works out. Also, if it's not right when you're drawing, you want to draw what is right and then erase what's wrong. Here's his nose is kind of a square, just a blocky, boxy. If you look at his chest right there, his mouth is about even with his chest. So I can bring that down, just go almost even, which means his nose needs to be a little bit lower. And voila. If you erase first and then draw what you think is right, sometimes we keep making the same mistakes because we lose our point of reference. I want to continue to have that point of reference. If you curve his jaw and then come straight up, that's about where his ear is. So kind of, you can take your pencil and you can line things up. So I'm looking at the end of that first little horn, and if you go straight out from the end of that first little horn and straight down from his ear somewhere up in there, that's about where his eye is. So you can kind of triangulate from his ear to the horn. Say somewhere in there is where that eye goes. And just move it over until it looks about right. I feel like mine, I need that a little bit more hump up there. So I'm going to have to adjust it just a little bit to increase that. Which means I have to increase wherever, you know, the ears are and all that stuff. From this little hump, if I make a curve down, it's going to kind of come into his leg right there. Once we've established all this, then we can move on to our ink and have a lot more confidence in what we're doing. Some of those other little details, like the shape of his foot, you can put that in now if you wanted to, or you can just say, well, I'll just wait and do that with ink. And you're not stuck to your drawing. So whatever you've drawn here, you can still alter it. You can still change it. If in the course of you drawing, you think to yourself, oh, that wasn't quite right, I can come in and I can change it. So you can start wherever you want to start. I'm going to kind of start with his little ear. And because we're going to be doing ink, I'm going to just throw this in a little bit, and we're going to zoom into him. Notice that he's got a little bump on his ear right there. We're gonna put that in there. It's a little fuzzy on the top. This top edge is very light. What would happen if we left off a lot of that edge? A lot of that edge we can just leave off. The head is the most important part. So we're going to spend a little extra time on the head, get the head looking good, and then the rest of it we can go pretty quick. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to just take my ink pen and I'm going to start at the darkest areas. Now, some of the darkest areas are inside the ear, of course his eye, maybe his lip here, and maybe the shadow that's along there. I'm not going to worry too much about the little wrinkles yet, but I will. And I'll show you how to do wrinkles using little hatched lines. So that's the first thing we want to do is I'm just going to come up and I'm going to do some little dots and dashes. I'm not drawing a solid line. Want to kind of break you that habit of drawing a solid line. So I'm just doing little dots and dashes. And sometimes if I do a line, it's going to be like a little zigzag or a bunch of little dots. So that's not a line. It's a little dots and dashes. I'm going to continue that on down through. Just little dots and dashes. And I'm barely touching the paper. That's another thing. Is with a felt tip pen, you don't have to press down with this. It's not like a pencil or something else. You can just barely touch it. So just little dots and dashes. If there's a shadow, like there's a shadow on the inside of his ear there, I can use just little crossed or little lines like this. You just go straight down, meet up with that one. And the inside of that ear is pretty dark. So you can hatch through it. You can put little tiny hatches through there. Any place that you feel like is a little darker than normal, you can hatch through that. Any little edges, like there's some little wrinkles up in here, I'm just going to use my pen to just hatch through that. Little dots and dashes. And you don't have to always go in the same direction. Sometimes I'll turn my hand like this and go in a different direction. So I'm just going to hatch through that. If it's really dark, I'm going to go over it 2 or 3 times in a different direction. So I went down, I went this way, now I'm going to go back this way. You just do little hatches until it's about as dark as you want it to go. Now remember, when in doubt, leave it out. So if you think to yourself, that's enough, it probably is. If it isn't, you can always come back into it later on. Here's some more little dots and dashes. Here's a little wrinkle up around his ear. Anytime you see a wrinkle, instead of doing a line, do little dots and dashes. They're going to look a lot more wrinkle-like. The top of his ear is almost gone, and so instead of drawing a line there, I'm just going to do some little thin hatches. Some little wrinkles with those little dots and dashes. And again, be very kind to it. Don't press down on it. Be gentle. Here's a little darker wrinkle. The closer your lines are together, the darker your value. So basically, that's it for the ear. We can always come back into it later on. Little wrinkle up here. This little hump, I do want to delineate that a little bit. And so I might put just a little dot or a little dash up there, maybe another one over here, maybe another one up there. And that's it. That whole edge is done. If you got rid of all that graphite in that ear and clean it up a little bit like that, that's what we're left with. Trust me on this. It'll look a lot better when we're done. That other ear needs to go. I need to make it just a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to hatch through that. There's the edge. If that isn't a good edge, I can come back into it and make a different edge. If I drew a line, I couldn't do it. The inside of his ear is much darker, so I'm taking that shape. It's just a shape, light and dark. And I just hatch through it and then think, oh, okay, it's darker, so I'm going to hatch through it even more. Until it's as dark as you want it to go. Here's the outside edge. It's a little darker. And again, just little zigzags, little dots and dashes. A solid line is hard to get rid of, as you all know. But little dots and dashes, you can get rid of those easy. Do more on top, change them. Anytime there's a wrinkle, instead of drawing a line, it's not a line, it's a dot and a dash, or a series of dots and dashes. And again, you're looking at that thinking, well, that's too light, Mr. Lowe. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to go back over it. And I can go over everything I've already done, and give a nice darker edge. The little wrinkles that are there over his head and his hump, just start out with little dots and dashes. And there's your wrinkles. And you can go back over it if you need to make it a little darker. Little dots and dashes is all you need. And they're just shapes of dark and light. So you try to match the shapes that you see. If you want to, and you think to yourself, oh, I don't know if those wrinkles are in the right place, you can take your pencil and you can add in some little shapes to kind of guide you as you come up and around, if you want to. But if one of those wrinkles is in the wrong spot, it's not that big of a deal. There's little dots and dashes, and you probably see my paper bounce a little bit as I'm drawing along. Maybe you can't see that, but that's how light I'm pressing. I'm not really pressing it against the desk at all. And you want to get kind of in the mode of drawing very lightly like that. These are just little wrinkles, dots and dashes. So notice I'm not worried about that edge down here. If you wanted to, you could kind of come in and wherever these little wrinkles stop, that becomes our edge. And so don't really worry about it. If you wanted to, you could put a little dot or a dash there and just say that's my edge, but leave it broken. Don't draw a line around everything. If we need it later on, we can put lines around things. But right now, we don't need it. I guess while I'm here, I think I'm going to go ahead and do that eye. Really hard to see what's going on in the eye. You just know that it's kind of a rounded shape. So I'm just going to throw in this little rounded shape. And you know it's dark, but you kind of know too that there's got to be a highlight in there. And so I'm going to just kind of leave out a little space in there as I go through. So I just left out a little space, a little bit of light in there. Let me get rid of this with my... So you can see the light that I've left in there. If that's too much light, I can always go back into it, use a dot or a dash to take out some. But any wrinkles, like there's a little wrinkle under the eye, just do it with little dashes in that kind of a smiley shape. Same thing over the top. Any wrinkles that you have, just little dots and dashes. Like I say, you can always come back into it later and add more if you need to. Here's little wrinkles around his eye, just little dots and dashes. Any kind of darkness that you see, like he's got some texture up in here. His skin has some texture. I'm not sure I want to put all of that in there, but you can add just a few little dots and dashes and create that. And as we go, all that gray will come through. If we feel like later on we need more, can always add it. But for right now, when in doubt, leave it out. Can always come back in later. Here's his little horn, and I'm just adding, using like little zigzags, sometimes you can do little swirls if you want. It's kind of up to you. Some of his flesh or his skin requires little rounded shapes because it's almost scaly. It's not really scaly, but almost. So you can do that, whatever you feel like you need to. Because it is kind of bumpy, and that's we want to apply our line so that our viewer, our audience, kind of feels the surface visually. There are many ways to draw. I'm just trying to share with you some of the things that I've learned. But just like when you were in grade school and your teacher taught you how to write, she taught everybody the same way. You all write differently now. The idea here is that you'll develop kind of your own voice, your own style, your own way of doing things. Don't compromise. So here we're just kind of going to let that edge take care of itself. He doesn't have a real smooth hide anyway. And so letting the edge be kind of bumpy It's kind of apropos for our texture. You know what apropos means? Kind of the way it's supposed to be. So you just go ahead and let that edge be soft and bumpy. His underjaw is really dark, so if I hatch through it a little bit and then keep hatching through it, I'll get it as dark as I need it. And there are some darker areas than others. So this whole side of his face is a little darker. I'm just very lightly and very quickly, I'm going to hatch through it. So just going to kind of go up from the start and just kind of lightly hatch through it, barely touching the paper. And the faster I go, the less ink gets out there. Here's his nostril, this little kind of teardrop shape that's kind of curved. Is it starting to kind of look like a rhinoceros? He's got a lot of wrinkles. You don't have to put them all in either, just enough. The little dots and dashes, that's really all you need. I'm barely touching that surface. We can always come back into it. So at this point, I'm going to get rid of all the graphite in the head because I don't like all that grayness, that graphite. I like the smooth cleanness of the ink. And you can go back over this as many times as you want to, getting the textures that you want to get in there. Sometimes I feel rushed, and so I feel like I got to get the rest of the body in. So I'm ready for the rest of the body. It's going to go by pretty quick. So as we go through there, the head, the most important part there, the head, pretty well done. We still have more that we could do on it. But I'm going to now go through the rest of the body, picking out only the dark areas. So as I go through, I'm just picking out the darkest areas I see with just little hatch marks, zigzags, you know, kind of whatever it takes. Because I want to get rid of all that graphite. And those little hatch marks are going to feel more like the skin of a rhino. Very bumpy, for lack of a better way to say it. I know you're thinking, why can't we just draw a line around everything? You'll regret it if you do. Because then, first of all, won't look as bumpy, as fleshy as the rhino. And if you need to change it, there's no way to change it. His back leg, you can't hardly see his back leg, but this is part of his back leg on his arm right there, on his front leg. Just a little bit right there is part of his back leg. So where my pencil is here is not quite right. So I'm going to have to adjust it. And that's okay. You're not stuck with your pencil. Just dots and dashes. And I've got to establish where everything goes. So I want to get rid of that graphite. My back leg was out too far. So I'm going to make it not out quite so far. But just scribble it in. It's not such a big deal if it's not quite right. The head is fine. The rest of it will get in there. So I am ready to get rid of my graphite. I want to get rid of that graphite as soon as I can. Also, maybe at this point you might think to yourself, well, I need a little shadow under there. Remember, we can't have a floating rhino. Nobody wants a levitating rhino. So I'm just going to throw in just a couple little dots and dashes. Maybe some grass would be like a feathered line. This little line that you flip is a feathered line. You can have some going one way, some going another. If you needed some leaves in there, you can just do these little little M's and N's, you know. You think, oh, okay, those look like little leaves or little weeds or something. And that's really all you need. You don't need a ton of stuff in there. But just enough that people say, oh, I get it. He's on the ground. He's not floating, not levitating. And again, you don't need a lot of detail there. Just enough to say, I get it. I get where he's at. I'm going to hatch through just about all of him here because he's all kind of dark. So I'm just going to go through and hatch through it. Take a section at a time, like a foot, leg. And that will create a little bit of value. As we go back over it, those little hatch lines won't be as dominant. Look how sketchy this is. But yet he's starting to look okay. Now I'm just going to go back into any areas that I think are darker and hatch through those. And I can go in a different direction I can do a different thing, like I could do little squiggles. I could do little rounded shapes. There's like a whole bunch of things I can do here to create that texture. Any place that feels a little darker, just keep going over it until it's as dark as you want it to be. There's a ton that we can do more into the head, but right now I want to finish most of the rest of that body there. So rhinos are almost blind, and from what I understand, they have no cones in their eyes, so they don't see color. Does it bother you that we didn't do a line on the top, that we didn't even have an edge? They just leave it go. Let it go. This back leg is pretty dark, so I'm going to hatch through it several times. And look how it's like scribbling. We're going to call it controlled scribbling, because we are scribbling, but there's a reason we scribble. Number one, because it's faster. Number two, we're just laying down ink. You just need as much ink as you need. Further away you get from the head, the more scribbling you can do. The head becomes that dominant area, that emphasis. So you may want to go back into it and make it really nice. The last thing you do before you sign it is just kind of go back over anything that you look at and you think, oh, okay, I need to go darker there, or I need to add a little more line or dot. So you just kind of keep going back over it until you're happy with it. Last thing you want to do is put your signature on it. A good place to sign it would either be right down here, not quite on the edge, or over here somewhere, maybe in these little weeds over here. That might be a good place for it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. And I hope that art makes your life a little bit better.